All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, there we go. All right, just making sure. I'm Sean Bediaco, a senior program officer in the center, and it is my pleasure to welcome everyone in person and on Zoom to today's ARC series session. I want to begin by acknowledging the group of center colleagues who comprise the ARC committee and have contributed to the planning for today's presentation. Cleopatra Frazier, Devri Manir, Adrielle Munger, Danielle Heller, Susan Musante, Andrew Kwan, and Pushpa Ramakrishna. Second, the views and opinions expressed in this talk are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of HHMI. Also, we thank you in advance for understanding that no videos or photos are allowed at any time during the presentation. So today's speaker is Dr. Kaui Merritt. Dr. Merritt is an associate professor of Indigenous Health Science at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. Her interdisciplinary work draws on concepts and theories from medicine, anthropology, sociology, psychology, and public health to reduce Native Hawaiian health inequities within a social justice framework. Her research addresses how social and cultural environments are embodied within individuals and shows how they manifest as the unequal distribution of disease between populations. She is specifically interested in the prevention of cardiometabolic disease through community interventions that aim to reinforce deeper meanings of health and wellness that address the cultural, historical, and social determinants of disease. Dr. Merritt earned a Doctor of Science degree in Society and Human Development and Health in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and a Master of Public Health in Health Behavior and Health Education from the University of Michigan. She is the recipient of several awards for her teaching and scholarship and has been instrumental in developing both a Bachelor of Science degree and a certificate program in Hawaiian and Indigenous Health and Healing at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. The title of today's talk is Ke Au Oiwi, Integrating Western and Indigenous Perspectives in a Health Sciences Curriculum. So please join me in offering a warm HHMI welcome to Dr. Merritt.
Okay, I'll use this mic. Aloha mai kako. Hello, thank you for coming, everyone. I really want to thank the team here at HHMI for inviting me and allowing me to share about our Hawaiian and Indigenous health and healing programs. You guys have made me feel so welcome. Thank you so much. So I'm here to talk to you today about integrating a Western and Hawaiian perspective in a health sciences curriculum. Our little preview of our key points that we're going to talk about: the historical context of the Native Hawaiian people. I've got 4 lessons learned from that context, and then I'm going to do a brief overview of the current health status of the Native Hawaiian people before I introduce you to our HHH programs. And then briefly I'll talk about our research and community engagement arm. I see our research director, Kat Burke, is logged on. Hi, Kat. And then finally, I'll end us up with talking about some of the program facilitators, some of the things that have helped our programs do really well, some of the challenges that we've come across, and then some of the solutions that we're coming up with as a faculty team. So in order to understand the origins of Native Hawaiian health disparities, we really need to understand the political and historical context. So I'm going to give us about a 10-minute Hawaiian history lesson today. So as we say in Hawaiian, Ikawā Mamua, in the time before, or in scientific terms, about 70 million years ago, the Hawaiian Islands were formed. Our creation story, the Kumulipo, talks about this event happening as Papahana Moku, our Earth Mother, giving birth to the islands. So Polynesians started to move throughout the Pacific about 5,000 years ago, and they started to arrive in Hawaii from the Marquesas Islands and Tahiti about 1,500 to 1,000 years ago. And one of our stories, the first navigator was Hawaii Loa, so our islands are named after him. One of the stories that we use to describe the migration between Hawaii and the South Pacific is about our demigod Maui, who arrives fishing up the islands in a canoe paddled by his brothers. We also have another story of how we became Hawaiians, about Haloa, our older brother, who's a taro plant. So we have the stillborn child of Wakea, our sky father, and Ho'ohoku Kalani, who was the daughter of Papahana Moku and Wakea. They had the stillborn baby. Out of the grave of that baby grew the first taro plant. And so their second child was born healthy and strong. They also named him Haloa in honor of his older brother. And he was raised to take care of the taro plant as his older brother, to always care for this plant so that this plant will provide us with food and nutrition. We have also, we're starting to move forward into time, get to the 12th, 13th centuries. These are really important times in Hawaiian history. We have the arrival of Pele, our volcano goddess. She is recorded in the mythology as fleeing Tahiti and looking for a better life in Hawaii, typical immigrant story. We have also in the kind of a couple of centuries later, we have the Samoan priest, the navigator Pa'ao, coming from via Tahiti. He brings the god Ku and starts a new religious, social, political order called the Kapu system that was in place when Cook arrived. We also have, towards the end of the 13th century, the establishment of our traditional Ahupua land management system, which breaks up islands into larger districts called moku. These moku are broken down into smaller pie-shaped wedges that run from the very tops of the mountain all the way to the ocean beyond the reef and are based on shared water and resource usage. Moving forward about maybe 100 years, in the 14th century, we see the end of long-distance voyaging between Polynesia and Hawaii until actually the 20th century, when the Hokulea canoe went down to Tahiti in 1976. We had a huge break in long distance voyaging for several centuries, and it's just been renewed in the last 50 years or so. Then we move forward about 400 more years, and Cook arrives. Captain James Cook arrives in Kauai in 1770, or Big Island, 1778. And then we have in 1819, we have King Kamehameha I dies, and within 6 months of his death, that kapu system that was brought by Pa'ao is overthrown and ended by one of his children and a couple of his wives. And Hawaii was left with this pretty strong religious and cultural vacuum that was then very quickly filled by Christianity when the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions arrived in 1820 from Rhode Island and Connecticut. In 1848, King Kamehameha III implemented the Great Mahele. This process was supposed to be a way to convert our communal land tenure system, that Ahupua system I mentioned, into the Western system of fee simple land ownership without disenfranchising the Native Hawaiian people. Unfortunately, he didn't have the community buy-in that he needed, and the process backfired. So most Hawaiians didn't see the need to sign up to get land that they've been living on for generations. And so once this land was not claimed through the official process that the king was trying to roll out, it instead got sold to private investors and corporations, some of whom in the next 50 years went on to participate in the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy. So in 1893, the monarchy and our last queen, Liliuokalani, was overthrown by European Hawaiian and European American businessmen who were under the protection of the US Marines. In 1898, President McKinley signed House Joint Resolution 259 from the second session of the 55th Congress. This is also known as the Newlands Resolution. And this resolution unilaterally annexed Hawaii into the United States. I'm going to kind of stop here now on history because Most of you guys kind of know the big events. Pearl Harbor was bombed in 41. We became a state in 1959. But most of the events that really significantly shaped contemporary Native Hawaiian health are within this time frame. All right, so I took us on, I guess it's maybe 5 minutes or 7 minutes or so, a little 5-minute history lesson here, because I have 4 really important lessons that I want us to learn from that history lesson. And the first is that I want us to acknowledge Indigenous knowledge. Most of the time when people discuss Hawaiian history, the timeline looks like this. Basically, big chunks are blacked out. So we've got Hawaiians showing up about 1,000 years ago. There's some non-specific Hawaiian stuff that happens. And then white folks show up, things go sideways, and we become a state. And that's kind of the gist of how history is discussed. Even when I was a child in the 1980s, that's basically, this was my Hawaiian history lesson, was what's in the blue here. So we missed this whole, like 1,000 years of history. But the whole reason why I'm taking us on this little journey through history, and I think a large reason of why I was invited to come and talk today, was to discuss what happened during this blacked out period and how it's impacting our health today. So just me, including these blacked out parts or grayed out parts on the timeline is a little bit of a rebellious act for me as a scientist, right? So, and much of the reason why people gloss over this area is because it's not verifiable in the Western sense. So, it doesn't occur in the archaeological record. There's nothing written down in contemporaneous journals of European explorers. So we're just gonna gloss over it. But there's significant evidence that while Indigenous oral history can't be taken 100% literally, it's often based on actual historical events. So all of these these gods, a lot of the gods that we have, Maui, Pele, Pa'au, I'll mention Moikeha a little bit later. These are real people who existed, who just did amazing things and were kind of elevated to the status of gods. So, I read this really interesting paper that just blew my mind maybe about a year ago or so, or 6 months ago. There's a 2016 paper, Australian geographers Nunn and Reed, they reported on 21 cases of Aboriginal Australian oral history that documented overland connections between nearshore islands and the Australian mainland when sea levels have not been low enough for those land bridges to exist in 7,000 to 10,000 years. This is oral history that's been passed down for 7 to 10. Like, let's sit and think about that for a minute. That is incredible, right? So many of these events that I've discussed were preserved very well throughout Hawaiian history in our oral traditions. And then they were written down during the initial stages of colonization when the Hawaiian language underwent a transition from a purely oral form of communication to a primarily written one. So we do have some really good documentation that was put down in books for us. We've now have Western brains and only think about, reading. I'm in a Hawaiian language class now, and it's like we have no textbook, we have no PowerPoint. It's just we're talking for an hour and a half, and I'm frantically Googling words to come up. It's very hard for me to just sit and listen. I think that's how our Western brains have been trained now. But so we have some really good stuff that's been written down. But one example of how kind of important it is to listen to oral history is once you start to think about what do these stories actually mean, what do they represent. So thinking about Papahanaumoku giving birth to the islands, well, my ancestors understood ecology, they understood geology, they understood that our creation chant talks about the hot lava forming the earth, and knew that somewhere inside this earth was hot rock that came out, and once it cooled, that's land. We describe it as Papahanaumoku giving birth to the islands. There's another story about Maui fishing up the islands. Obviously he didn't fish up the islands, but the story, imagine yourself 5 to 7 week journey on a long distance voyaging canoe. You start to get close. You've got some long lines trolling out for tuna, marlin, other big fishies out there. And you start to see these islands rising up out of the sea. That's the best darn fishing story that's been told in 1,000 years. So lastly, we have the story of Moikeha. So he is probably the last long distance navigator to arrive in Hawaii about the 14th century. He's about probably the last one. So he's some of this one stories kind of documents he flees Tahiti after having this disastrous affair with his brother's wife. And his arrival in Hawaii is so well documented that the chant that his foster son composed when they showed up and arrived in Hawaii, we're like, oh, thank God, we're back on land. That chant is still used today. My foster son danced this dance with his hula halau, with his hula school 2 weeks ago. I did it with a couple of colleagues in November at an event at school. That's how well some of these things are being preserved. All right. Oh, does this click too? No. It's supposed to be clicking. All right. So our next lesson was Hawaiian and Western knowledge can coexist. So Ike Hawaii is Hawaiian knowledge. This is our second lesson. So there's a difference between just acknowledging something and actually utilizing it, right? So I think the Academy in the West have at least gotten to the point where they realize that we need to at least recognize and acknowledge the Indigenous. But I think there's still a lot of trouble struggling with like trying to learn from and actually how to use Indigenous knowledge and figure out how to incorporate those two things. So here's a couple of examples. Like I mentioned, my ancestors understood evolution. They understood ecology. They understood the relatedness of living beings. Our Mother Earth gave birth to the islands when the oceans were still hot. From those hot waters, the simple creatures, ocean creatures grew. Then we had the simple land creatures grow. And then we have more complex beings growing until humans populated the Earth. Then we've got one other thing is we recognize that we're from someplace else. We recognize that culture evolves and moves. So we weren't Hawaiians when we showed up, right? We were something else. We were what we now call Polynesians from the islands of Marquesas, from Tahiti, even Samoa and Tonga. So the story about, Maui showing up from somewhere else, he was an immigrant. Pele was an immigrant. Pa'a was an immigrant. And so we didn't become Hawaiian until generations of our people had been born and sustained and died and buried on this land. And we kind of see this with the story of Haloa, where we have the cycle of birth and death and food providing for us. And he's the first, Haloa was the first Hawaiian. His parents were not Hawaiian. He became Hawaiian after multiple generations of our people being sustained from this land. So we also, need to kind of think about the further evolution of culture. So we hear about oftentimes in Hawaii, like we'll acknowledge the end of the Ahupua'a system in 1848. We'll acknowledge the end of the Kapu system in 1819, but we don't often talk about the beginnings of those things and what came before and how Indigenous knowledge changes and evolves like every other culture. So when we forget to talk about the origins of some of these systems that happened before Western contact, Indigenous knowledge gets stuck and it gets stagnant. And people forget that, we had 1,000 years of history before Cook showed up. So there's kind of a thing in Hawaii, in some of our fashion, we're kind of stuck in this like late 19th century, like monarch era of like the height of our monarchy. And it's even reflected kind of in our language today, the way we dress, the way we practice our culture. And I'm like, well, what about before that? Like our culture didn't start and stop with 1893. So we tend to like kind of forget these things and wipe over them. So I think what we in the sciences really need to remember is that, again, Indigenous oral history and oral tradition contains information that was based on hundreds or thousands of years of observational data and was preserving information that was crucial for survival in places like islands with very limited resources. So I'd like to make the point that Indigenous knowledge is the longest longitudinal study that humankind has access to. And most of you maybe most of them, all of us in this room are scientists who understand the value of longitudinal data. And so, in comparison to contemporary scientific techniques that are very, very precise and can cut out a lot of that statistical noise from longitudinal data, we've got the really like long-term, huge observations of thousands of years that we can now condense down maybe into like a 5-year ROI, right? With kind of our modern statistical techniques and research methods designs. But both of these realms of knowledge are so important and can be really, really powerful when combined. All right, so our third lesson is we need to acknowledge the very intense historical trauma that is impacting the Hawaiian community today. So with Cook's arrival, we get to the point of Hawaiian history where most Native Hawaiians really understand this and the impacts of this event on a very visceral level. I remember being a child and going to the 100th anniversary of the overthrow. There's a big protest in 1993, and just feeling that with the word in Hawaiian is like eha kaumaha, like this very, very heavy sadness, and that stuck with me as a 10-year-old kid. And still today, as a 42-year-old woman, I can feel that. And I talk to my students and they can feel that, but they don't have the vocabulary to really connect historical events to contemporary trauma. So most of what I teach is connecting those dots together, helping people understand how historical or intergenerational trauma is impacting the contemporary health of our Indigenous people today. So the most obvious place for us to start this conversation is with Cook's arrival in 1778. So and the depopulation from infectious disease. So after living through the COVID-19 pandemic, I think we're probably all still a little bit traumatized from that. I think about what life must have been like in this 120-year period from 1778 to 1898. And it must have been horrendous. Like how bad COVID-19 was, like that was nothing, right? Compared to what these people were living through. And, this is, so like I said, it's 120 years. My great-grandfather was born in 1892. His daughter is my grandma. She's 97. She's still alive. And so, yeah, and she ain't going nowhere. She ain't going nowhere. So, that's just one generation that's connecting me to what's on this timeline. And from my great-grandfather, there's only probably 2 or 3 more generations connecting him to Cook's arrival. And that's a very short amount of historical time to have experienced so much loss. So when you combine, the trauma of the depopulation, where we went from we had whooping cough, tuberculosis, syphilis, Hansen's disease, cholera, everything, common cold, flu, measles, the whole gamut. Our population decreased about 93% from a pre-contact estimate of about 680,000. Estimates run from 300,000 to up to 1 million, but the latest data says about 680,000 to only 46,000 in 1874. So that's pretty incredible. So when you combine that trauma from the depopulation along with the loss of our social, religious, political structure, with the ending of the kapu system and the arrival of Christianity. And then we've got the disenfranchisement and subsequent poverty and reliance on imported foods or Western foods with the Great Mahele. And then ultimately the loss of national sovereignty with the overthrow and the annexation. It's like a triple whammy, right, for the health of Native Hawaiians. All right, so our last lesson is that, I mentioned community buy-in with the Ahupua'a system. We need community buy-in. Anybody who works in community health knows we need community buy-in. So, throughout this timeline, we have several examples of very unilateral top-down decisions, either from Hawaii's monarchs, such as the ending of the kapu system, or the Great Mahele, or the elite businessmen who overthrew the monarchy in the late 19th century. One more click. So it's kind of fair to say that what happened in these 4 events that are highlighted on the screen are responsible for the majority of the historical and intergenerational trauma present in the Hawaiian psyche today. Now, ending of our lessons, flash forward about 80 years. So we have in the 1970s and 1980s, pioneering Native Hawaiian physicians such as Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell, Dr. Emma Lully and Dr. Ben Young, giving them all a shout out because they're my mentors. We're noticing and documenting significant health disparities among Native Hawaiians. And then in 20th century now. In 1985, Congress and the Department of Health and Human Services commissioned what was called the Aolamau Report. And so this was a report to investigate the status of Native Hawaiians and try to figure out what's going on here. After the report was concluded, the task force had several recommendations. And in order to enact these recommendations, Congress passed both the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Act of 1988 and the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act of 1992. So these two bills did three things. They first acknowledged the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom and annexation, and I quote from the bill, without consent of or compensation to the indigenous people of Hawaii or their sovereign government. Number two, these bills extend indigenous rights to Native Hawaiians through other laws such as the Native American Programs Act of 1974, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, the National Museum of the American Indian Act, and the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And then number three, these bills establish the basis of the Native Hawaiian healthcare system. So all of these actions and these policies were starting to acknowledge that Native Hawaiians suffered undue burden of multiple health disparities that were ultimately a reflection of historical, social, and cultural events that marginalized this community and negatively impacted our contemporary health. So next, I'm going to go over a few health statistics so you get a picture of what our health is like today. So life expectancy has, risen from 1950s to 2010s for every ethnic group in Hawaii, for the state as a whole. Hawaiians have always lagged though. So today we are at 76.6 years compared to 82.4 years for the state as a whole. Overweight and obesity, our prevalence is about 74% compared to 60.5% as a whole. I think the lowest was Chinese at 38.7%. Hypertension and diabetes are both kind of moderate. We're not bad to moderate. We're not the worst, but definitely, we have room to work on. But given the low life expectancy of Native Hawaiians, we really have to take these last two statistics into context. So, people are dying before they reach the age of developing hypertension, developing diabetes, developing cancer. So even like cancer is kind of still moderate, but stage and diagnosis are usually worse for Native Hawaiians. So we're getting later, and these patterns are very familiar, I'm sure, to most of you in this room. Adverse childhood events factor very heavily into adult health and well-being. Native Hawaiians report the second highest rate of adverse childhood events of any ethnic group in the state of Hawaii. So we have 25.8% of us reporting at least 4 or more adverse childhood events. And that's, that kind of threshold, if you're familiar with ACEs and the Kaiser study, once you get to, one or two adverse childhood events is pretty normal. Once you start to get to 4 or more, you see clustering where things start to really go bad in families. And that, having 4 or more really increases your risk of all sorts of negative adult health consequences. So the only ethnic group that has more ACEs, or reports more ACEs in Hawaii, are American Indian and Alaska Native. And they're a really small portion of our population. So, with the increased risk of substance misuse, suicide, severe mental illness, all of those things being so strongly and positively correlated with ACEs, it's not surprising that Native Hawaiians also report a very, very high levels of substance abuse, incarceration, and houselessness. So data on substance misuse among Hawaiians is extremely limited. And it has been since my mother was working in this field in the 1990s. I remember her complaining about, oh God, this data is dirty and this is terrible and I can't get the numbers. It's still the same way, like 30 years later. And I'm, still working. So I'll talk in our research, when I talk about our research arm, we're actively trying to improve that data right now. But the 2019 National Survey on Drug Use and Health showed that Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander youth have almost a 4 times higher rate of lifetime heroin use and 1.5 times higher rate of lifetime amphetamine use compared to white youth. And then a 2023 study of unhoused individuals in Hawaii found that while only about 19% of Hawaii's population are Native Hawaiian, we've got another 5 or 6 that are Pacific Islander, 75% of the population of this particular study was Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, and that 69 and 24% of those reported methamphetamine and opioid use, respectively. So we have, I think if you were to ask a lot of the health leaders in Hawaii, what is our biggest health problem? You kind of get split between obesity, cardiometabolic diseases, and substance misuse. Those are our two kind of main problems we've got. All right, so what if we use, so we kind of talked about our history, we talked about the status of the health, so what can we do about it? What if we use the health education curriculum to both heal our population, our community, and to educate them? So this isn't a brand new concept, right? There's tons of literature out there that talks about the effectiveness of culturally grounded education, culturally grounded health interventions. But the way that we did the Hawaiian Indigenous Health and Healing programs at UH West Oahu is really unique, at least in the United States. In 2017, a group of faculty members at the University of Hawaii West Oahu began to dream about having a program that would do four things. First of all, be very innovative and incorporate Western health sciences and Indigenous healing techniques. Second, we wanted to make sure that this program addressed our healthcare shortages in Hawaii. So we always talk about our physician shortage, our nursing shortage. There's actually 87 different health sciences professions. We're short on pretty much everything. To try and even get CNAs or home healthcare in Hawaii is really hard. We also wanted to make sure that the program was healing both students at the micro level as well as at the community at the macro level to address specific health disparities within the home, within the family, and then also within the community. And then lastly, we knew, as I mentioned, community buy-in, we knew that the most important thing was going to be community buy-in and engagement with our community. We wanted to make sure that this program engaged with community through teaching, through research, and through practice. So back up a little bit, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the University of Hawaii system. So within the University of Hawaii system, we have 10 total campuses. We have our flagship campus. I don't know if I have a, there we go. Our flagship campus, University of Hawaii at Manoa, and then Hilo, both offer degrees from the bachelor to the doctoral level. And then we have UH West Oahu right here, and Maui College. We offer degrees at the bachelor level only. And then we've got 6 community colleges. Oh, is that this one works. I think this might be the only pointer thing. Okay, all right, cool. Oh, that's even better. Wow, okay, all right. Ooh, yay. Why did Jeff give me this? All right, I think that was the only laser time I was gonna use the laser though. So, all right. So we have about 6 community colleges and then a handful of outreach sites that aren't listed on this map. Now, UH West Oahu, we are a pretty new university. So although we have the UH system, we're all separate universities with separate applications and separate colors and separate mascots. It drives our students nuts. And we're trying to figure out a way how to make movement within the system easier. So when I was applying to Manoa as a graduate student, I had transcripts from Manoa, from Leeward Community Colleges and Windward Community, and I had to submit all of my, really, it's all this, don't you have it in the same record system? So we are a separate university, but we are related to the main campus. We first started in 1976 in order to accommodate planned population growth on the west side of Oahu. We are a small teaching campus. We've only got 318 faculty members. And as of fall 2023, we have 2,863 students. Our 2024 numbers haven't come out quite yet. The majority of our students are transfers. I can use the laser again. Transfers from Leeward Community College, which is just a few miles away. So our largest programs are business administration, social sciences, and applied sciences. The vast majority of our students are either female. Here's my clicker. Female or first generation college students. We have about 50% of our students are Native Hawaiian or Filipino or mix of both. And these are traditionally underserved, educationally underserved populations. And college age students make up traditional college age students make up a big chunk, I think somewhere over here, a big chunk of our student body, but we also have a very large population of returning adults. We have a cool Kupuna elder program that allows seniors to come and take classes for free. They have to register late, but my mom's taken a couple of classes at Manoa, which is cool. Next, I'd like to introduce you to our Hawaiian and Indigenous, our HHH faculty. On the left here, we have Dr. Manu Meyer. She's an associate specialist in the chancellor's office and then an epidemiologist by trade. Next to her is Auntie Lynette Paglinawan. We use the term auntie in Hawaii to confer respect to our elders. So she is our program elder that we work with and was one of the founders of the program along with Auntie Manu. Next, I'm there in the green. Next to me is Auntie Lahala Cruz. She is, so both Auntie Lynette and Auntie Lahala are really special in that they have training in both traditional healing. So they are both traditionally trained Haku Ho'oponopono, which is a master in our art of family mediation, and they have MSWs. So they have that, both the Western and traditional training. So Auntie Lynette took over, or Auntie Lahala took over in 2023 as our Ho'oponopono instructor when Auntie Lynette retired. And then next to her is Kat Burke. She is one of my best friends and is a PhD student in epidemiology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She's also the founder and director of the Mapuna Lab, which is our research arm that I'll mention in a little minute. And she helps to teach the public health type classes in our program. In the back, we've got Konane Brumbley between Auntie Lahala and I. He also is traditionally trained. He's got a master's degree in Hawaiian studies from UH Manoa, but he's our herbal medicine instructor. He's got several years of traditional training in that. He's also super cool, training to be a lomi lomi or massage practitioner under our next two faculty members, Enric Ortiz and Ka'iulani Akamine. So Ka'iu she's an associate specialist in UH West Oahu as well. And so her and her husband, Enric, who's in the middle and the back, they have their own traditional lomi lomi massage school on the side outside of their work from West Oahu. And one of the things that's made our program really great is this group of people, this group of faculty right here that it took us several years to kind of find the right people to come together. We have a lot of great kind of family connections. One really cool one is that Auntie Lahala's brother is my mom's MSW classmate, and they were both Auntie Lynette's practicum students in grad school. So we have that cool connection. Like I mentioned, Kat's one of my best friends. So, and then Enric and Ka'iu are Konane's teachers as well. So we have these personal professional relationships that make us really work well together. We don't agree all the time. We definitely but we're able to have those difficult conversations and get through what we need to get through in order to figure out for the best of the program. All right, so we ultimately came up with 5 learning outcomes. So we wanted to make sure that we are able to understand global issues and how those actually impact local issues and our Native Hawaiian health. Just last night, I was lecturing about, we have a phrase in Hawaii, where you went to school, where you went high school, and it's asking, where are you from? Who's your family? Are we related? Do we hate each other? What's your socioeconomic status? What neighborhoods do you live in? And I connected that back to the global sugar trade. And so we want to be able to have students make those kind of connections between the local and the global history and contemporary. Then we want to have students be able to communicate orally. So I mentioned that Hawaiian language used to be a purely oral form of communication. While the vast majority of our students don't speak Hawaiian because it is still an endangered language, we still want them to honor this tradition, our indigenous tradition of being able to communicate orally and get up and speak publicly and speak their mind and say what they have to say and share with the knowledge that they've got. We also want our students to conduct rigorous research using traditional methods as well as contemporary scientific methods. We also want to be solutions focused. We don't want to just study the problem to study the problem. We want to be able to do something about it. And then finally, just kind of in general, be able to live within both the Native and the Western academic worlds. So within our Bachelor of Applied Science, we've got, and even our certificate, which I'll mention, we've got two main buckets of classes. We have theoretical classes that kind of fall under Western, public health or community health, health disparities, program planning, research methods, sounds very familiar. And then we've also got our traditional healing classes. And this is what makes us really, really unique. So we've got Ho'oponopono, which is our family mediation relationship building technique. We have La'alapa'au, which is traditional herbal medicine, and Lomi Lomi massage. So there's a few programs that are similar in Canada and Australia, but this is the first 4-year bachelor's degree in the United States that combines Western public health with traditional healing. And that's where we really shine, and where we have a lot of innovation. I just got a call last night from a woman who's spent about 35 years on the continent, has now moved home to Kauai, and is like, I want to do this program because of the traditional healing classes. Like, sure, public health is cool, right? Like, everyone loves public health, but it's those traditional healing classes that are bringing people into this program. So we also have, if you look at like other programs, like there's some similar programs, like we have a Native Hawaiian and Indigenous MPH track at the University of Hawaii Manoa. We have an Indigenous Public Health Certificate at Hilo, and there's the Indigenous Public Health Doctorate at North Dakota. So they're all awesome programs, but they don't have that traditional healing aspect. So I also developed about a year in 2020, I developed a 18 credit standalone certificate. So I kept getting calls from people my first year with the bachelor's degree in 2019. Kaui, I really want to take your program, but like I've already got a doctorate degree. I don't really want to do another bachelor's degree. And I'm like, I got you. I'll make a certificate. So we've got this 18 credit, 6-class certificate. It can be done in as fast as a year, 3 credits in the fall, 3 credits in the spring, or you can do, however long you want. So I got some students that are doing 1 class a year. I'm like, that's fine, no problem. We also, that program has really enabled us to tap into professionals who already have credentials, who are already working in the fields, to come and add value to their current, professional knowledge. And they bring so much to the classroom too. That's the other great thing, is we've got about half of our students are traditional age, like health sciences majors, who want to go on to be physicians, PAs, OTPT, kind of nurses. And then the other half of our students are like people that could act as their mentors, both in the classroom and outside, who want to come and learn a little bit, of extra knowledge. The other great thing about this program, both of the programs, is that you can complete it totally online. You can do it in a hybrid format where it's got some online, some in-person classes, and some online classes. We're working towards offering everything both online and in person. We're not quite there yet with our enrollment numbers, but you can do this totally online, which is cool. So that means all of you can come and enroll. I heard HHMI has a tuition assistance program. So that's really great. We've been able to reach so many people within the Hawaiian diaspora on the continent. Last semester, I had like six students just from the continent. So since this is such a new and unique degree, I always get the question, what kind of job can I get with this degree? And this program is really, really well suited to have students go into graduate school, either in public health or social work, counseling and psychology. But students can also just enter the workforce in the bachelor's level, either as teaching or research coordinator or program coordinator. I've got this phrase up here, Mauli Ola. So this is kind of like well-being in Hawaiian. So any kind of nonprofit agency that's in the wellness field. But honestly, a lot of the jobs I think that my students are gonna eventually fill don't exist yet. They're gonna, and I tell students, like, you can make up your own job. Like, I've got some really creative ideas from some of the students in our program. So I just wanted to show you guys a couple of charts on our growth. So in the last 5 years since the program has rolled out, both of them, we've had a really nice amount of growth. We started out in fall of 2019 with 2 majors, and now we've got 27 across both the certificate and the BAS. So we're still, you see this upward trajectory. Like, this is great. This is the number. And I actually found out about these programs. We have a whole institutional research office, And the guy who runs it was so excited when he saw these numbers. He emailed me. I was like, Kaui, Kaui, look at your program. I'm like, yes. And then so this graph on the right shows we have 60 academic programs at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. And these are the 15 with the highest amount of growth from 22-23 school year to the 23-24 school year. And although we're not number one, we are both the certificate and the BAS are represented within this top 15. So that's really, really super exciting. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of feedback from our students, so you guys can hear directly what they have to say about the program. So first we have Piolani Loren. So she is a Native Hawaiian living on the continent in California, currently a staff therapist at UC Riverside's Counseling and Psychological Services. She finished her certificate in spring of 2024. So she says that the experiential coursework returned lost ancestral wisdom to her and also restored a sense of cultural identity and a sense of belonging. She said that the program has also solidified her decision to pursue her doctorate degree with the aspiration to indigenize mental health care through contemporizing graduate level mental health care education and clinical practice. Next, we have Kahelani Rivera. She also finished her certificate in the spring of 2024. So she says, as a licensed massage therapist and traditionally trained Lomi Lomi practitioner, I feel the HHH program has broadened my understanding of Native Hawaiian health. The fusion of healing classes within an academic setting was a wonderful experience that helped me further connect with my cultural roots. The healing classes were grounded in Hawaiian values and reminiscent of traditional healing. Overall, the program has enhanced my professional expertise and fueled my personal journey of cultural rediscovery and shaping my commitment to advancing the well-being of our communities. And we've got Kayla Kachola Tom, who finished her BAS in the fall of 23. She says, my journey started in 2019 as a senior who graduated from Wanalua High School. Like most, I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to major in. So in my freshman year, I started off as a business major with a concentration in hospitality and tourism. I was interested, but it didn't feel fulfilled. A year later, COVID-19 hit. One day, I had a random feeling to go on the UH West Oahu website and explore the different majors. I scrolled for 2 minutes and came across HHH. The moment I read the major description, I instantly felt called to switch. It was a feeling I will never forget. I felt it in my na'au, in my gut, that this was my calling. Switching to HHH was the best decision I've made. In the future, I hope to work in the field of substance misuse prevention for Native Hawaiian youth by incorporating Aina, or land, as a way of healing. I can't wait to dedicate my life to healing the Lahui, Hawaiian nation. And last, we have Dr. Christine Park. So she finished her certificate in the fall of 23. The HHH certificate program is an amazing opportunity to learn about Native Hawaiian well-being and healing modalities. The program provided a nice balance of historical and contemporary content, and the information in the courses are essential and relevant. As someone who is born and raised and who lives and works in Hawaii, this program has helped me to be a better provider in our community. The certificate program was the best investment I made and furthered my education and my professional competence in the fields of mental health care and education. So we've got kind of moving into our research and engagement arm. So this is just a kind of preview of what overview of what we've been doing recently. So I've kind of my last solo project up here, Indigenous knowledge education. We did 14 key informant interviews with cultural practitioners about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on their teaching practice. And then just in the last year or so, I have joined forces with my good friend Kat Burke, who founded the Mapuna Lab. And so this is a collection of scholars working on culturally grounded health education and intervention work. And so we've like I said, we've joined forces, and now we're kind of ready to take over the world. Maybe just UH West Oahu, but currently we have 3 contracts that we're working on. We have Native Hawaiian cultural anchoring. This project clusters several culturally based approaches to mitigating opioid use disorder, polysubstance use disorder, and other health disparities within Hawaii. We're working with the State of Hawaii Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division. We have Kawehena Oke'ao, which is through the Hawaii Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So this is a culturally based healing program that offers ho'oponopono or family kind of counseling sessions within our prison, 2 of our prison systems. We're going to be expanding over the next 5 years to all of the main 4 islands. So the goal of this program is to provide support for incarcerated persons and their families who are preparing for reintegration back into their home once they leave a DCR facility. And lastly, we've got the Hawaii Opioid Initiative evaluation. This is also through the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division. So with this, we're going to be evaluating the state of Hawaii's response to the opioid crisis through the Hawaii Opioid Initiative. We're going to be creating a data dashboard, evaluating first responder response times to opioid overdose events, mapping out geographic locations, evaluating access to healthcare, and then because this is really important because Hawaii is geographically a really challenging state. It's big, not that big, but we got a lot of water. So we have it's not easy to go from Hawaii Island if you're overdosing to our main trauma center in Honolulu. That's like an hour flight. So, what do we do about these very rural locations that are essentially kind of you can't drive between them. So moving, I kind of wanted to close us out by talking about some of the facilities, some of the things that have made our program really great, some of the challenges that we've come across, and then think about some of the solutions and what we're still working on today. So I think throughout this presentation, I've given you a really good idea of what this program is about. Nice rosy idea of showing you, lots of support from our students. We have a lot of support from the community. We have a lot of support from our university leadership. But it was definitely not an easy journey. Those of you who do program implementation, you're probably like, no, there's been some drama right along the way. Those of you who have rolled out very innovative or new, unique programs probably know there's a lot of drama involved. So we have, but I think most of our challenges that we've had really boil down to the idea of trying to teach a Hawaiian way in a Western university. And that's been, challenging. So based on that, we've needed to really clarify the goal of our program. So on Tuesday, we're actually going to meet as a faculty group and work on that. And so these are really things that we're figuring out in real time right now. So we need to figure out, how do we do this? How do we teach in a Hawaiian way in a Western university? How do we really integrate Hawaiian and Western knowledge in our classes, and not just within our program, but within the whole university, and even the whole UH system is really grappling with this idea. So, reflecting on what has made the program so successful, I've come up with really 3 reasons. Number one is support from our university leadership. We have a Native Hawaiian chancellor. At the time these programs were being developed, we had a Native Hawaiian vice chancellor of academic affairs. And really, of any campus on the UH system, I think West Oahu is probably the best to host this kind of degree. We have a very high proportion of Indigenous students. We're in a rural location. But also we have physical access to the main campus. We have access to the medical school. We have access to our hospitals, our trauma center, and the majority of our healthcare workforce on Oahu. So we still, even though we have our we're kind of tucked away on the west side of Oahu, we still have access to Honolulu, which I think is really important. We also have the right group of faculty. So like I said, it took us some time to find our little crew, but I think we got it. I think we're pretty good. We have those personal and professional ties that drive us to work together as best we can and to push forward with the shared vision for this program. But lastly, the most important thing is our community, is our support from our community and the fact that we're rooted in our community. And that's really the number one thing. So we've always had community classes in this program where we've invited community members to come in. And so Auntie Lynette, who's there in the pink and purple, this is actually our faculty initiation when I first started. That's me with my friend Brad. And we so she held this class called Nohona Hawaii, Hawaiian Ways of Living. And we would have, before the pandemic, it was in person, maybe 12 to 15 people kind of moseying throughout the semester. When we went online in the fall of 2020, we had over 100 people signing up for this class. This little class in this random little teaching university in the rural west side of Oahu had 100 people, with people from all over the world. It was really cool. So we have this hunger from this community that really wants this information. But we also, where our students at West Oahu are from West Oahu. Most of our students, I'd probably say, 70 to 80% of them live within 10 miles of our campus. Their families have lived there for generations. My 4 generations of my family living in the moku that West Oahu is. I still live there now. I grew up there my whole life, so I live, 10 miles from campus too. And I've got 4 generations of my family who live there. We ain't going nowhere. So this is very different from schools like, Georgetown or Harvard, where you've got people coming from all over the world to descend on Boston and DC to learn information. And some will stay in Boston and DC. Some will go back home to their communities, and the rest will scatter. So unlike those students, our students are rooted next to our university. They've been there for generations. They're not going anywhere. So this is a very, locally based grassroots school, grassroots program, where we are teaching students from, that we're going to be serving for the rest of their lives. Maybe their kids and their grandkids are going to go to this university. So they're taking this information and putting it right back into their homes, right back into their families. So the stuff that we're teaching in terms of like traditional healing classes, we basically teach like first aid level kind of stuff. It's stuff that they can use on their kids and they can use on their families, and then also professionally go out and make a difference. So I think that's probably, for this type or any other type of program who's going to come that's going to follow this model, is you need to have that really deep community root. So trying to figure out how do we teach in a Hawaiian way in a Western university? That was a very complicated diagram. So we have, the majority of our students are basically, health sciences, public health students, and there are about 125 students are taking these classes, the public health classes that I teach. And then they go off and do, the rest of their coursework. So I've got a semester with them. Then we've got about 27, approximately 30 students within who are majoring or minoring in Hawaiian and Indigenous health and healing, and they're the ones who are mainly taking these traditional healing practices. But the type of, so in Hawaiian healing traditionally, the teacher chooses the student. So the teacher observes the student, says that kid looks like they're going to have the personality to be a haku ho'oponopono. They're going to be really good at mediating the family. That kid really likes plants, so maybe they're going to go into herbal medicine. And those kids are mentored basically from, their lives. And the teacher is the one who sets the curriculum every day. There's no syllabus. You just show up and say, teacher, what teach me? But that's very different than a Western style classroom. So my very naive way of dealing with it in the beginning was to not deal with it and just let my cultural practitioners teach the way they wanted to. I've learned it's not the best way to do that. So we're really trying to figure out, okay, how, and it kind of ended up with me, and I wanted to be very careful about what type of information we were teaching in terms of the traditional healing program. So we have this word NOAA over here. So this is a Hawaiian word for free. This epidemiology is NOAA. Anybody can learn epidemiology, right? There's something really sacred about it. There's something really special about it. But with our traditional healing practice, this is kapu. This is taboo. So we have to keep some of this information secret and only release it when a student is ready. So we have to be very careful about that. So I'm always very careful about saying we're not creating traditional practitioners in this program. That's not our role as a Western university. If you meet one of our, healing teachers, they like you, they want to take you into their practice on the side, great, cool. But do not come into this program thinking that you're going to graduate and be able to work as a traditional, practitioner and treat people and make money. No, that ain't going to happen. So I was very careful to say that, but maybe I overemphasized that, and like to the point where, it seemed like there was an imbalance of the emphasis on the program. So we're trying to actively recalibrate that right now. And so kind of finally, one of our solutions for how do we do that is, number one, sort of really focusing on what is the goal of this program. So that's what we're going to hash out on Tuesday. And how can we really integrate our two ways of knowing and our two worlds together? So I think, one of the things that we can do is to try to integrate the methodologies together. So some of the things that I try to do in my class, in my public health kind of classes, is to practice the art of kilo or observing, so that our main, kind of research methodology in traditional Hawaiian thinking is observing, is to sit and observe and be quiet and to listen and to think. We were talking over lunch about meditation and just that process of like sitting and not, and sitting and just observing and absorbing. Aina or place, Aina is land, so Aina or place-based learning is really important. So understanding, where you are located and how do you take care of that land? How is that land going to take care of you? We have a story that, or kind of a saying I was telling Blanton today earlier this morning, we have a saying in Hawaii, Keikio Kaina, means I'm child of the land. So that can often mean like metaphorically, I'm from Hawaii, I'm born and raised here, but it also specifically refers to eating taro, eating haloa, and the calcium in that's now building our bones. That the food that we are, so eating local is a big thing. So eating the food that is grown in the land that we live on is now literally making our bodies. So we are literally children growing from this land. And that's something that, my ancestors understood, and something that we need to, as a country and as a society, need to kind of keep going on, further in terms of sustainability, ecology, and even in, the face of climate change and whatnot. So I also want to we also need to bring in more of the cultural and spiritual aspects of silence. So trying to look into our relationship with land, our relationship with each other, our relationship with our ancestors, our relationships with our future generations. So we always need to think about, how do we care for this earth in a way that's going to make our ancestors 7 generations back proud, and how are we going to sustain this earth for 7 generations in the future? And a lot of that has to do with, you need to have a relationship with those people. Even if they don't exist anymore, or they don't exist yet, you still need to have that relationship with them. So one of the things that we do in Ho'oponopono that Auntie Lynette is really good at is repairing relationship and healing relationships with family who have passed already. So you still, in order to heal that intergenerational trauma, you need to make peace with them. And you need to make peace with who you are for your future generations. And then we can start thinking about, okay, how do we make peace with our relationship with the land? Are we taking care of the land, or are we not? Are we treating it as our mother? Are we treating it, the plants, as our older brother? Or are we just consuming and taking? So again, this runs into our reciprocal responsibility to and with nature. We have a responsibility to care for this earth, and the earth has a responsibility to care for us. And also, knowing when traditional knowledge and Western knowledge needs to stay separate. So going back to that kapu versus noa idea, when do we, as an Indigenous community, need to keep things closed and protect certain information from being misused or misappropriated? And what can be let go? And what can, what do we as Native people need to teach the rest of the world about how to survive in the next 1,000 years? Versus what do we have to keep close and protected, because in 2,000 years we're going to need more. So I just want to end out with my references, and if there's any anything that any slides or whatever references that you want, always email me. But this is, so my contact information. Oh, look, I have my wrong title. I just got tenure this summer, so I forgot to update I think I pulled this Mahalo slide from a presentation that wasn't updated. But that's my contact information. So I'm always available on email, and Sean knows how to get a hold of me. But just again, thank you so much for having me here and allowing me to share a little bit about our little corner of the world in Kapolei. So thank you so much. I think we have time for questions, yeah? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Merritt. So we have time for a few questions. For those who are joining us online via Zoom, you can feel free to either raise your hand to offer your question, or you could use the Q&A section on Zoom. And for those who are here in the room, if you would just please raise your hand, and Dr. Merritt will acknowledge you, and we have time for a number of questions. And when you, for those of us in the room, please make sure to use your microphone when you ask your question.
Thank you, Dr. Mayer. I had a question regarding your accrediting agency. When you're bringing in your Indigenous courses, how was that addressed with your accrediting body, since you were bringing in a curriculum that wasn't that is Indigenous, not traditionally like the Western
so
curriculum that you're used to?
We're accredited by WASC, and I'm actually doing program review right now. So on the 11th, I'm going to start doing program review. Our program is not accredited, we're not accredited by the Associated Schools of Public Health. So, but our bachelor's program is accredited as a Bachelor of Science under WASC. So we just made sure that our core curriculum was meeting the various mandates and guidelines, and so we haven't come up with anything too challenging. One of our major challenges was finding traditional practitioners that were eligible to teach at the university. We have been lucky in that all of our faculty, except for one, has a master's degree. One of them does only have an associate's degree, so I had to rewrite the job description and include equivalent traditional training, and that's a sticky issue. That's an issue that Hawaiian healers have literally been working on for over 100 years. I'm not kidding. We have documentation from the 19th century that Hawaiian healers were coming together to talk about licensure and accreditation, and that problem has not been solved. So, good question. But we still have syllabi. So even our traditional practitioners have syllabi. We have 3 credit hours. We have a certain time block, and so it kind of got to work within that framework of What else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Vic Sivanathan. Thank you so much for this. I truly enjoyed it. There was some moments that took me back to conversations with my family. So my dad is a big believer of traditional Indian medicine. But the conversations he has with his doctors or with the rest of the family, it's always sort of adversarial. It's he's got high blood pressure.
Right.
He wants to do something traditional, and you're like, you have to take this medicine, and it's never a yes and, it's always against each other. And I wonder if you've had a chance to look at the conversations that happen in the households of students that take your courses.
So that's actually a big driver of the development of this program. We know that people are using traditional medicines. Like, these practices have not died out. They're still, despite all of the oppression that's started to happen, we're still here. We're still practicing our culture. So we know that people are still using these medications, but it can be dangerous, right? Because there are interactions. So we wanted to create the next generation of healthcare workers who maybe are not. So like I said, we're not creating traditional practitioners. We're training future Western healthcare workers who kind of get the gist of what traditional medicine is about. We're trying to get them to learn how to interact with cultural practitioners. That's a big thing. So I grew up kind of blessed being able to learn from elders. I noticed a lot of our younger students, they were really freaked out by working with Auntie Lynette. Like, the older students love her, but the 22-year-olds are like, wait, she said that we have a project that's due tomorrow. What? It's on the syllabus. I'm like, calm down. This is what working with elders is like. And so we want them to be able to, interact with practitioners. We want them to be able to have, if a patient comes in and says, hey, I'm taking noni juice for my diabetes, and they're like, okay, cool, let's talk about that. And not like, oh my God, you have to stop that. What are you doing? So we wanted to be able to train practitioners who are able to have those conversations and not totally freak out and say, all right, what are you doing? Because we want patients to be honest with us. And we don't want to say no and then have patients just leave the healthcare system and then die early of whatever, something. So that is one of the main, big reason for why we developed this program, that training aspect. Any Zoom comments, questions?
I actually have another question.
Okay. Sure.
And so we run a program here that's called the Science Education Alliance. It works with professors to do research with their early undergraduate students. And recently we've had some schools stop the program. It's on pause as they figure out how, these are some of the tribal colleges and universities that are part of the program, to sort of reassess how this course within Western science situates or fits with traditional knowledge. And so I'm curious to know if there are conversations with some of the different communities across the, I guess, continental US.
I have not had a lot of contact with other, groups or nations, like since I started this program. I think I used to travel all the time. I used to, be here in DC 2-3 times a year, go back and forth between Boston. But since the pandemic started, I haven't been traveling a lot, and I've just been so focused on, oh my God, I have to develop 12 new classes in 2 years. So, but I feel like that's the next conversation, especially getting national exposure for the programs. I think this kind of talk will help. But I do want to connect out and talk to other schools about how they're kind of integrating Western traditional knowledge. We've had multiple conversations as we're developing this program with communities within Hawaii and across different islands, but not outside. So that's kind of our next step.
Yeah, and I wonder if I could contact you just to help us think about how to re-engage with these schools. Thank you.
Yeah. Otan.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Susan. I really appreciate what you've been sharing. I was really intrigued by the aspect of your program that has to do with learning about relationships and what you described. And I didn't catch it all, but I'm curious about that because I'm thinking about your students. And so they're learning how to build their practice in that regard. And then wondering, how does that translate into how they themselves interact with their own families, with their own community, and with one another. And then the next kind of level of question is, how do they interact with you all? And so how does the feedback, the skills and practice and way of being, kind of, how are you seeing that kind of fold into how you're growing and evolving as a community also?
So one of the main reasons why I chose, when I was ending my postdoc and moving into the next phase of my life, one of the main reasons why I chose this job instead of the other, mainly research. This is a teaching job I applied for, but mainly research positions. The reason why I totally took a 90-degree turn in my career from research into teaching was because of this university and because of their values of family. We all bring our kids to school and to meetings, and I bring my mom and my son to convocation all the time. But I think so relationships are the basis for this community and the basis for Native Hawaiian community, and the basis for this university. So I felt very much like this university was a family. And so in traditional Hawaiian education, one of the big values is the safety of the classroom, the safety of that teacher-student relationship. And I've kind of coined Punana space as so Punana is nest, and our immersion preschools are called Punana Leao schools. So their language nest, and we're incubating the little baby birds and taking care of them. So that's the sense that you want to have in your classroom with your students, is that nest of safety and love. And so that's a huge basis of the art of Ho'oponopono, is that creation of mending relationships, repairing relationships. And so a lot of that healing is just, you have to start with even your daily interactions with your kids. And so one of the things that we kind of encourage our students to do, that my family we're working on, is to do just a check-in session with your kids every Friday. So we have fire pit Friday. My husband is making this fire pit contraption thing for our house, so we pause for a little bit. But we have fire pit Fridays where we sit with our kids and we talk about stuff, and we don't have phones and whatever. And so just starting with our own family. So we teach our students in this program, they take Ho'oponopono to learn how to communicate with their families. And then how do we take that out to, if you're out to your practice as, a healthcare worker, how can you communicate as a physician? I just had like a horrible experience with my reproductive endocrinologist, her practice partner. And he was like awful. I was like, oh my God, I never want to work with this man again. So, so how do we train our students to not have those kind of interactions with their patients, whether they're going to be physicians or nurses or, therapists? And so we have, I think looking at like the student feedback, two of the four of those people are, so Kapilani and Christine are both like therapists. I have another couple of students who just graduated who want to go be LMTs. And so this program was very instrumental in their development of their practice. Like they've talked about, making the relationship with their kids stronger. And if you're going to go into a field like social work or therapy or counseling, we have a word pono, which means like right and correct, my son's name, because we want him to embody this value. Pono is so important in the Hawaiian community, in the Hawaiian culture. You have to be right with yourself. It's that sense of being right. So we start in our program with learning about ho'opono, which is to make right, like on a small level. Then we have ho'oponopono. You've heard me use this word. So in the Hawaiian language, when you have you repeat something twice, that's like big. It's like making it bigger. So ho'oponopono is to make things really right. And that's to repair relationships within family. But family is also not just who's here on this earth. It's who's gone before and who's coming next. So that's your family. I think changing that mindset of which relationships you need to like work on, and which relationships are important is kind of a core part of this program. So expanding that mindset of your family is not just your parents, your grandparents, your kids. It's like 7 generations back and 7 generations forward, and everybody around you, like 7 degrees around you, right? So it's like everybody. We've got Kanani.
Aloha, kumu Kaui,
Hi.
Ovao Tanani from Health 360.
Aloha.
Aloha. With all the information available now, why do you think Kanaka still struggle with health? And how can we get more Kanaka to get motivated in eating aipono?
I think a lot of it is that eha, right? That kaumaha, that sense of kaumaha, that sense of sadness that we still need to heal from all of like the pilikia that happened in colonization. Because colonization is not something that happened today, right? Or not something that happened like 150 years ago. It's still happening today. Colonization is an active process that goes on every single day. So we're struggling to try and, just the emotional bandwidth of dealing with being a colonized people, being women, being people of color, oh my God, that's just so much emotional baggage already. And then now we got to make a living and, do good at our jobs and be a good friend and be like, that's a lot of effort. So I think kind of to answer your question is like, we have a lot on our plates, right? As like Indigenous people. So learning how to manage everything that we have to deal with as Native people or as people of color or, as any marginalized group it's hard to sometimes make the choices that we know we need to make for our health and ourselves when we're just like burnt out. I feel like burnout, we always talk about burnout, like the professional sense. I feel like Native people are burnt out. We're really burnt out. Women are burnt out. Women are burnt out. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
So thanks for the talk, and I want to congratulate you on the program that you designed and also on obtaining tenure recently. One of the things I've been thinking about as I listen to your talk and listen to some of the questions is the word that comes to mind for me is harmony, and you're attempting to strike a balance between Western in indigenous health and,
Yep.
and a sense of harmony. And many of us here are attempting to do a similar thing as it relates to inclusive science education, inclusive research culture. So the question would be to you, do you have some principles that could be kind of generalized and not so unique to your campus
Yeah.
that would be helpful?
Yeah, that's a hard one because so much of it is unique. But like, so Auntie, one of my mentors, Auntie Manu, who you guys saw in the faculty photo, she talks about being the same differently. So we're all different, but we're all the same. We're all people. So I think having being right with yourself, being pono with yourself. You don't have to be Hawaiian to, right? That's not like a Hawaiian concept. So being able to sit with yourself in silence, like meditate for 10 minutes without your brain going to mush, like we were talking about lunch, that's a universal concept. Having good relationships with your kids and with your family, that's a universal concept. Having good relationships with your colleagues, that's all universal. I think having the drive, I know I'm preaching to the choir today, but having that goal of better science, of, addressing health disparities, like those are all kind of universal things. But I think, reaching out to, what you guys are doing here, right? Reaching out to other people that are different, but also the same is super important. I think, and then reaching back towards your community and going back towards your roots while kind of reaching, so you have to kind of reach in two directions at once, reach out to the rest of the world and then go back to your community, whatever that is. When I have students write papers about indigenous health disparities, I'm very loose about what indigenous is. Everybody's indigenous to somewhere, right? I made my husband take a DNA test and he's like 90% British. Because I asked him, I was like, honey, this is a native person. It's really important to know genealogy. What are you? He was like, baby, I'm white. I'm like, yeah, I know, but he's like, well, I know my grandpa says Northern Georgia. I'm like, no, try again. You're not from Northern Georgia. You're from somewhere else. So DNA test is British Isles, Scandinavia. That's native too, so I think remembering that we're all native, remembering that each of us are native to somewhere, remembering that each of us have cultural and family practices that maintain relationships. We have cultural practices that maintain wellness. We have foods that we eat. We have places that we go. We have people that we seek out to keep ourselves whole and ourselves healthy. We all have those. They're just different. And I think, going back, reaching back to what that is, even if you're like, your sense of wellness is like Thanksgiving dinner with all your family. And like, that's one of my things, is thinking about Norwegian Thanksgiving dinner with my family in Minnesota. So I always, think about like, oh, I'm Native Hawaiian. Yes, I'm also Norwegian. I'm more Norwegian than I am Hawaiian. So, and I really value that time with my Norwegian family. I love making lefse. I love eating it more. I love hunting with my dad. I love cooking with my grandma. But that's my white family. And I love that. And that keeps me whole, is to remember that, I have those cultural practices from both sides of my family. Hope that answered your question. Okay.
Yes. All right. I'm sorry. I'm having some technological malfunctions here. We have one last question. I'm going to paraphrase it just in the interest of time, but have you had any pushback from administrators in your state with this indigenous approach to medicine, especially with the new, quote, unwokeness, end quote, culture?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm trying to think. I was going to say no, and then I was thinking about all of the challenges and I see Kat on the Zoom, that Kat and I have had trying to implement some of our programs. And my God, yes, I realized it's almost like, am I still being recorded? I'm used to it. It's okay. I'm going to say, I'm tenured. I can say it. It's almost so my school is very used to teaching. We're not used to doing a lot of research. And Kat and I brought in a significant amount of research and contract money into the school. We're doing things, we have a lot of Indigenous programming, which means working with cultural practitioners who maybe don't have tax clearances. We've had to pause one of our projects to make sure everyone has tax clearances. That's been a whole thing. Flying in, so like Auntie Lahela lives on Hawaii Island, so she flies in. She teaches her classroom online, but we fly her into work on the Kabehena Oke'au program on Tuesdays. This was like in our budget. The state was fine with it. The Attorney General's office was fine with it. Our chancellor was fine with it. We were all fine with it. And then we get to actually buying her first ticket, and our business office was like, nope, can't do it, can't do it. This would be like having an employee ask for mileage to come to Kapolei. And we're like, oh my God, it's in the budget. So it took like 3 memos and like having, approval from our sponsor, from the Department of Corrections. It had like, we had to like get, I screenshotted like all these emails that chancellor was fine with it. And I was like, so I wrote a memo. I was like, y'all knew this. You all knew that she was flying in. This was approved by you. Why didn't you say something before? And so it's almost like an institutional racism thing where like we're doing Native stuff and our business office is like, oh my God, what are you doing? You can't do that. No, we have to stop. And so they halt it at the administrative level, right? They won't release funds. They won't buy plane tickets. They won't buy supplies. They just stop it. And things grind to a halt. And that's what we've been dealing with the last year at West Oahu, and what Kat was dealing with at Manoa for the year before, 2 years before that. And why, she guys like, come to West Oahu, it's much better. Well, it's been challenging. So I think we haven't necessarily had pushback from the community, from the unwoke community. Our university leadership administration is all for it. My department is so diverse. We've got 3 African Americans, 2 Indonesians, 3 Hawaiians, 4 African Americans, a Filipino guy, and then and we're 2 white ladies. We got Kat and Megan, and we're so diverse. So my university's not, but I think it's more like our the business and fiscal people, they're the administrative gatekeepers. So we've had some institutional racism kind of problems with that, but we're working through it. It's all right. We're pushing through.
Thank you. First, I do want to just thank you again. So let's all just give Dr. Merritt a round of applause. This has been a very rich and informative talk. 2 quick announcements. First, for everyone that's registered for today's presentation, you're going to receive an email message with a survey via email. We ask that you please take a few seconds. It should not take very long to complete that and provide feedback to us. And for all of you who are here with us in person, we invite you to join us in the central space for a social time with great food and snacks and the opportunity to talk more with Dr. Merritt. And for all of those of you who are joining us on Zoom, thank you again for participating. We hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Cool. All right.